Deep in the control room of the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at data that made her blood run cold. The James Webb telescope had captured something 17 billion light-years away, a galaxy so impossibly small it shouldn't exist, yet burned brighter than entire galactic clusters. Sarah wasn't just any astronomer. She was a former SETI researcher who'd been silenced after discovering radio signals that suggested we weren't alone. Now, working under a false identity, she'd stumbled upon something far worse than alien contact. The tiny galaxy was moving, not drifting through space like normal celestial bodies, but accelerating directly toward the Milky Way at impossible speeds. Inside its miniature spiral arms, Webb detected structures that looked disturbingly artificial, geometric patterns that resembled cities, roads, entire civilizations compressed into a space smaller than our solar system. The most terrifying part, according to the data, this microscopic universe contained more mass than 1,000 galaxies our size. If it reached Earth, the gravitational forces alone would tear our planet apart. But what were those signals emanating from within it? And why did they match the same mysterious transmissions that destroyed her career 15 years ago? The control room hummed with the usual late-night quiet fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across banks of monitors. Sarah had volunteered for the graveyard shift, specifically to avoid her colleagues' questions. She'd learned the hard way that some discoveries were too dangerous to share. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the telescope's filters, hoping the anomaly would disappear, a glitch, a calculation error, anything but what the data suggested. Instead, the image sharpened with terrifying clarity. The microscopic galaxy pulsed with an inner light that seemed to follow patterns, rhythms that reminded her of breathing. "Dr. Chen?" The voice behind her made her jump. Marcus Webb, the night technician, approached with 2 steaming coffee cups. "You've been staring at that screen for 6 hours. Everything okay?" Sarah minimized the display window before turning around, forcing a smile. "Just running some routine calibrations. You know how it is." Marcus handed her a cup, his eyes lingering on the blank screen. "Funny thing about routine calibrations, they don't usually make people look like they've seen a ghost." She took a sip of coffee, buying time. Marcus was sharp, too sharp. In her previous life as Dr. Elena Rodriguez, she'd made the mistake of trusting a colleague with her SETI findings. Within days, her research had been classified, her position terminated, and her identity buried so deep that even she sometimes forgot who she really was. "Just tired," she said. "These long shifts mess with your head." Marcus nodded, but didn't leave. "You know, my girlfriend works in the archives. She mentioned something interesting the other day. A researcher named Rodriguez, who disappeared back in 2008, made some pretty wild claims about extraterrestrial signals before vanishing completely." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced. How much did he know? Had she been too careless? "Sounds like science fiction," she replied, turning back to her monitor. "The universe is already strange enough without inventing conspiracies." "Maybe." Marcus's reflection appeared in the dark screen beside her own. "But sometimes the strangest things turn out to be true. Elena Rodriguez claimed she'd found signals that proved we weren't alone. The government buried her research so deep that most people think she never existed." Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward the delete key, ready to erase everything. But the tiny galaxy's image seemed to burn through her closed eyelids. If she destroyed this data, who else would discover the truth? And how long did humanity have before that impossible mass reached Earth? "Hypothetically," Marcus continued, "if someone like Rodriguez were still out there, still working under a new name, they'd probably want to know that some of us remember, some of us believe." She turned slowly to face him. "That's a dangerous assumption. So is ignoring evidence that could save the world." He pulled out a tablet and showed her a screen full of code. "I've been monitoring the telescope's data streams. Whatever you found tonight, it's big enough to trigger every anomaly filter we have." Sarah stared at the readouts, her cover blown but her secret potentially safe with someone who understood the stakes. The question was whether she could trust Marcus with something infinitely more dangerous than alien radio signals. The tiny galaxy's signals weren't just matching her old SETI data, they were responding to it. Each pulse from the microscopic universe corresponded to transmissions Earth had sent into space decades ago. Whatever intelligence lived within that impossible realm had been listening, learning, and now it was coming home. She opened the display window, revealing the galaxy in all its terrifying glory. Marcus whistled low under his breath. "Elena Rodriguez found signals," Sarah said quietly. "But Dr. Sarah Chen just found their source." The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Sarah barely noticed as she hunched over her workstation in the depths of the Goddard Space Flight Center. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the maze of monitors displaying data streams from the James Webb telescope. At 3:47 a.m., she was alone except for the night security guard and the distant hum of servers processing terabytes of cosmic information. The anomaly stared back at her from the primary display, a cluster of pixels that shouldn't exist. She'd run the calibration sequences 17 times, checked for instrument malfunction, even called her colleague Dr. Marcus Webb at home to verify the telescope's operational status. Everything checked out perfectly, which only made the impossible data more disturbing. "Computer, enhance Sector 7-7 Alpha by factor 12, she commanded, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. The image bloomed on screen, revealing what appeared to be a spiral galaxy complete with arms, a central bulge, and what looked like stellar formations. Except this galaxy measured roughly 0.3 micrometers across, smaller than most bacteria. It hung in space like a cosmic impossibility, its structure perfectly intact despite being compressed to a scale that should have collapsed it into a black hole billions of years ago. Sarah pulled up the spectral analysis data. The readings made her stomach clench. The object wasn't just emitting light in impossible configurations, it was generating energy signatures that matched galaxies millions of light-years across. The mathematics simply didn't work. According to every known law of physics, the gravitational forces alone should have crushed this thing into oblivion before it could form a single star. She reached for her secure phone and dialed Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project's lead theoretical physicist. The phone rang 6 times before Elena's groggy voice answered. "Sarah, do you have any idea what time it is? Elena, you need to get down here, now. Can't this wait until we've found something that breaks physics?" A long pause. Sarah could practically hear Elena's mind shifting into gear. Despite her reputation as a skeptic, Elena had never known Sarah to make dramatic claims without solid evidence. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. While waiting, Sarah continued her analysis. She plotted the object's trajectory and felt ice form in her veins. The microgalaxy wasn't stationary. It was moving through space at approximately 0.03% the speed of light, following a path that would bring it into the outer solar system within 8 months. At its current velocity, it would reach Earth's orbital zone in just over a year. The security door chimed, and Elena burst through, her usually immaculate hair disheveled and her MIT sweatshirt inside out. She'd clearly dressed in the dark. "Show me," Elena said without preamble. Sarah gestured to the main display. Elena stared for a full minute, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching fear. "This has to be a processing error, or contamination on the sensors." "That's what I thought. Look at this." Sarah pulled up a time-lapse sequence showing the object's rotation. The microgalaxy spun with perfect consistency, its spiral arms maintaining their structure as they rotated. It's been rotating at exactly 847.3 kilometers per second at the outer edge for the past 6 hours of observation. Elena grabbed a chair and sat heavily. "That rotation rate, Sarah, at that speed and scale, the centrifugal forces should tear it apart in microseconds. What's holding it together?" "I don't know," But there's more. Sarah highlighted specific data points on the spectral readout. Look at the emission patterns from these regions. They match the signatures of active galactic nuclei, supermassive black holes millions of times the mass of our sun. Inside something the size of a virus? Inside something the size of half a virus. Elena stood and began pacing, a habit Sarah recognized from their graduate school days. It meant Elena's mind was racing through possibilities, testing each against known physics and finding them all wanting. Could it be some kind of hologram? A projection? From what? And why project it in empty space 47 astronomical units from the nearest stellar object? Maybe it's not a galaxy at all. Maybe it's something else entirely that just looks like one to our instruments. Sarah had considered this, but the data was too consistent, too detailed. Elena, I've been analyzing this for 8 hours. The gravitational lensing effects are consistent with actual mass distribution. The redshift patterns match galactic rotation curves. Everything about this screams real galaxy, except for the fact that it's impossibly small and moving toward our solar system. Elena stopped pacing and turned to face the display again. You said it's moving. How precise is your trajectory calculation? Sarah's mouth went dry. Precise enough. If it maintains current heading and velocity, it will pass within 0.7 astronomical units of Earth in 13 months and 16 days. The room fell silent, except for the ambient hum of electronics. Elena stared at the impossible object on the screen, her face pale in the monitor's glow. We need to call Peterson, and probably the Pentagon. Sarah nodded, though part of her wanted to delay that conversation. Once they reported this up the chain, control would slip from their hands entirely. The emergency meeting convened at 0600 hours in the JWEUST control center, but Sarah had been awake for 36 hours straight. Coffee had stopped working around hour 20, replaced by pure adrenaline and the growing certainty that everything she thought she knew about the universe was wrong. Dr. Marcus Webb, the mission director, looked as haggard as she felt. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under his eyes as he pulled up the latest data on the main screen. Tell me you found an error in the calculations. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she accessed her workstation. I've run the numbers 17 times using 3 different methodologies. I've had the algorithms checked by teams at MIT, Caltech, and the European Space Agency. The results are consistent. She paused, watching the impossible data scroll across the screen. The object is accelerating toward our solar system at a rate that increases exponentially every 12 hours. The room fell silent, except for the hum of cooling systems and the distant chatter of radio communications. Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Propulsion Physics Division leaned forward, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of the monitors. Exponential acceleration requires energy input. Massive energy input. We're talking about forces that would tear apart any known material. That's not the strangest part, Sarah continued, calling up a 3-dimensional model that rotated slowly in the holographic display. The structure looked like a galaxy in miniature, complete with spiral arms and a brilliant central core, but compressed into a space smaller than a city block. Watch what happens when we map the gravitational fields. The model shifted, revealing streams of energy that flowed in impossible patterns, gravity wells that pushed instead of pulled, space-time curves that folded back on themselves in ways that should have created paradoxes. The spiral arms weren't made of stars and gas, but something that bent light without absorbing it, creating pockets of absolute darkness surrounded by brilliant coronas of twisted photons. Webb rubbed his temples, a gesture Sarah had seen him make countless times during budget meetings with NASA administrators, but never during a scientific briefing. Could this be some kind of natural phenomenon we've never observed? A gravitational lens effect that's creating false readings? No. The voice came from Dr. James Mitchell, who had been silent until now. The elderly physicist had worked on the original Hubble project and commanded respect throughout the astronomical community. His weathered hands shook as he manipulated the controls, zooming in on specific sections of the structure. Look at these energy patterns. They're not random. There's organization here, purpose. These formations are architectural. Sarah felt her stomach clench. She had seen the same patterns, spent hours staring at them, hoping someone else would voice what she was afraid to say. The spiral arms aren't following gravitational dynamics. They're maintaining specific geometric relationships that have no basis in natural physics. It's as if someone built this thing. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Elena was the first to break the silence. How long until it reaches our solar system? Sarah's throat felt dry as sandpaper. At current acceleration rates, it will cross the heliopause in 72 hours. But the exponential increase means those calculations become less reliable every minute. It could be much sooner. Webb's face had gone pale. What happens when it gets here? We don't know. Sarah brought up a new display showing theoretical models. The gravitational effects alone should be catastrophic, but the readings don't match any of our predictions. It's as if normal physics simply doesn't apply to this object. The space around it behaves like it's following different rules entirely. Mitchell had continued his analysis while they talked, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface with surprising dexterity. Sarah, look at this. The energy signatures from the central core, they're not electromagnetic radiation, they're not gravitational waves, they're not anything in our standard model of particle physics. She leaned over his shoulder, studying the wavelength patterns he had isolated. The data streams formed complex, repeating structures that reminded her of something she couldn't quite place. Then it hit her. Those look almost like information, Mitchell finished. Encoded information transmission, but transmitted through what medium, I have no idea. The control room erupted in overlapping conversations as the implications sank in. Sarah found herself staring at the main display, watching the impossible object continue its approach toward Earth. Its spiral arms pulsed with energies that violated conservation laws, while its core broadcast signals through unknown dimensions of space. She thought about her daughter, probably getting ready for school right now, completely unaware that everything in the universe had changed. In 72 hours, maybe less, this thing would arrive in their solar system, bringing with it physics that could rewrite reality itself. Webb's voice cut through the chaos. We need to contact the White House, and Moscow, and Beijing. Whatever this thing is, whatever it wants, humanity needs to be ready. But as Sarah watched the entity's inexorable approach, she wondered if anything could prepare them for what was coming. The elevator descended past floors Sarah had never known existed. Marcus's security badge granted them access to sub-level 7, where the walls changed from sterile white to reinforced concrete, and the familiar hum of the building's ventilation system gave way to something deeper, more industrial. How long has this been going on? Sarah asked, watching the floor numbers tick downward on the digital display. 18 months, Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Ever since the Kepler array picked up the first gravitational anomaly. We thought it was equipment failure initially. The elevator shuddered to a stop, and the doors slid open to reveal a corridor lined with blast doors. Sarah's stomach clenched. This wasn't a research facility, it was a bunker. Marcus led her through a maze of security checkpoints, each requiring biometric scans and coded access cards. The few personnel they encountered wore expressions of barely contained anxiety, speaking in hushed tones and avoiding eye contact. Sarah recognized some faces from conferences and journal publications, brilliant minds from institutions across the globe, all gathered here in secret. "Welcome to Project Lazarus," Marcus said as they approached a final set of double doors. "What you're about to see, it changes everything we thought we knew about the universe." The doors opened into a vast underground chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The space stretched upward for at least 50 feet, its ceiling lost in shadows despite the banks of LED lights. At the center stood an array of equipment she'd never seen before, quantum computers the size of shipping containers, particle accelerators configured in impossible geometric patterns, and suspended above it all, a spherical chamber filled with swirling, luminescent gas. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves emerged from behind one of the quantum arrays, her silver hair disheveled and her lab coat stained with what looked like coffee and exhaustion. Sarah had read every paper Reeves had published on quantum mechanics, but the woman before her looked like she'd aged a decade in the past year. "Dr. Chen," Reeves said, extending a trembling hand. "I'm sorry we had to bring you in like this, but your discovery accelerated our timeline considerably." "Timeline for what?" Reeves gestured toward the spherical chamber. "Contact." Sarah stared at the swirling gases, and as her eyes adjusted, she began to see patterns in the movement. Not random turbulence, but organized structures that pulsed and flowed with mathematical precision. "What is that?" "A simulation," Marcus said. "We've been trying to model the interior structure of your microscopic galaxy. The quantum computers generate a virtual environment based on the data from the Webb telescope, and what we've found—" He paused, running a hand through his hair. "It's not just moving toward Earth, Sarah. It's accelerating." The blood drained from Sarah's face. "How fast?" "Current velocity suggests arrival in 14 months, Reeves said. "But that's not the real problem. The real problem is what's inside it." Sarah moved closer to the spherical chamber, mesmerized by the patterns within. As she watched, structures formed and dissolved, geometries that seemed to exist in more dimensions than her mind could process. "What am I looking at?" "Consciousness," Reeves whispered. "The galaxy isn't just a collection of matter and energy. It's alive, and it's trying to communicate." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She gripped the railings surrounding the chamber, her knees suddenly weak. "That's impossible." "6 months ago, we thought so too," Marcus said. "Then we started receiving transmissions." "Transmissions?" Reeves nodded toward a bank of monitors displaying waveforms and frequency analyses. "Radio signals, but not like anything we've ever encountered. They're encoded in quantum fluctuations that shouldn't be able to maintain coherence across interstellar distances. The patterns suggest intelligence, but the underlying physics—" She shook her head. "They're rewriting the fundamental constants of reality as they go." Sarah stared at the data streaming across the monitors, her mind racing. "You're saying this thing, this galaxy, is changing the laws of physics?" "In its immediate vicinity, yes. Space-time curvature, electromagnetic constants, even the strong nuclear force. Everything becomes malleable in its presence. It's like it exists in a bubble of custom physics. And it's coming here." "Not just coming," Marcus said grimly. "According to our projections, it's preparing the way. The gravitational anomalies we've been detecting aren't side effects of its movement, they're terraforming." Sarah felt the world tilt around her. Terraforming for what? Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights bathed the chamber in an ominous glow, and automated voices announced, "Alert! Incoming transmission detected. All personnel to stations." Reeves rushed to the monitoring station, her fingers flying across holographic displays. "It's another signal," she called out over the noise. "Stronger than before. Much stronger." Sarah watched the waveforms spike and pulse on the screens, and deep in her gut, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever was coming toward Earth in that impossible galaxy wasn't just trying to communicate anymore. It had found them. The coffee had long gone cold in Sarah's hands as she stared at the data streaming across her monitors. 3 days had passed since the initial discovery, and the impossible galaxy, now designated NGC-X1 in the classified files, continued to defy every attempt at rational explanation. "Still here?" Marcus Rodriguez appeared in her doorway, his security badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. The former Navy intelligence officer had been assigned as her liaison, though Sarah suspected his real job was to keep her from talking to anyone outside the rapidly expanding task force. "It's accelerating," she said without looking away from the screen. "Not just moving toward us, actively accelerating. That shouldn't be possible for something with its apparent mass. Marcus stepped closer, studying the readouts he couldn't possibly understand. How long until it gets here? That's the thing. Sarah finally turned to face him, exhaustion evident in her eyes. Based on its current trajectory and acceleration pattern, I'd say 18 months. But the physics, she gestured helplessly at the screen. Marcus, this thing is the size of a small city, yet it's behaving like it has the gravitational influence of something 1,000 times larger. And it's moving through space at velocities that should tear it apart. Maybe our instruments are wrong. I've checked everything, twice. I've had the team at Palomar confirm the readings independently. Hell, I even got the Chinese to run verification through their deep space array, unofficially, of course. Sarah rubbed her temples. The data is solid. We're looking at something that exists in violation of every physical law we understand. Marcus pulled up a chair. Over the past 3 days, he'd watched this brilliant woman slowly unravel as she grappled with data that challenged her fundamental understanding of reality. What about the signal analysis? Any progress there? Sarah's expression grew even more troubled. That's where things get really strange. She pulled up a new set of displays. The electromagnetic signatures coming from NGCX1 aren't random. There's definitely a pattern, almost like communication, like a response. Sarah highlighted specific portions of the data. Watch this. Every time we point the Webb telescope directly at it, the signal intensity increases. When we redirect our observations elsewhere, it decreases. It's as if the thing knows we're looking at it. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. That's impossible. You keep using that word. Sarah's laugh held no humor. I've thrown impossible out the window. We're operating in uncharted territory now. The secure phone on her desk buzzed. Sarah glanced at Marcus, who nodded. She picked up the encrypted line. Dr. Chen, this is Dr. James Harrison from CERN. I understand you're heading the NGCX1 analysis. Sarah straightened. Harrison was legendary in the physics community, a theoretical particle physicist whose work on quantum mechanics had earned him 2 Nobel Prizes. Dr. Harrison, yes. What can I do for you? I've been brought in to consult on the theoretical implications of your discovery. I've reviewed the preliminary data, and I need to ask you something. His voice carried an urgency that made Sarah's stomach tighten. Have you run any quantum field analysis on the gravitational signatures? Not yet. We've been focused on the basic observational data. I need you to run a quantum vacuum fluctuation analysis immediately. Look specifically for evidence of zero-point energy manipulation. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. What am I looking for exactly? Proof that this thing isn't just defying physics. It's rewriting them. The energy signatures you're seeing, the impossible mass-to-size ratio, the acceleration patterns, they're consistent with theoretical models of space-time manipulation that we've only imagined in our most speculative papers. The analysis completed, and Sarah stared at the results in stunned silence. The quantum signatures were unlike anything in the known universe. Patterns that suggested the space around NGCX1 was being actively manipulated at the subatomic level. Dr. Chen, are you there? I'm here. Her voice was barely a whisper. The quantum field readings, they're showing massive space-time distortion. It's like the entire region around the galaxy is being artificially curved. That's what I was afraid of. Harrison's voice grew grim. What you're looking at isn't just a galaxy, Dr. Chen. It's a machine. Something is using technology we can't even comprehend to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. Marcus watched Sarah's face pale as the implications sank in. Dr. Harrison, she said slowly, what exactly are we dealing with here? Based on these readings, proof that we're not alone in the universe. And whoever or whatever is controlling that galaxy has mastered physics in ways that make our greatest achievements look like stone tools. The line went dead, leaving Sarah and Marcus sitting in stunned silence as the weight of the revelation settled over them. Outside her window, the world continued its normal routine. unaware that everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe had just changed forever. The secure elevator descended 23 floors beneath the Goddard Space Flight Center, carrying Sarah deeper into a world she never knew existed. Dr. Marcus Webb stood beside her, his security badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken implications. "How long has this facility been operational?" Sarah asked, watching the floor numbers tick downward. "Since 1952, Webb replied without hesitation. Though it's been significantly expanded over the decades, what we're about to show you has been in development for the past 18 months. The elevator shuddered to a stop, and the doors opened onto a pristine white corridor lined with blast-resistant windows. Through the glass, Sarah glimpsed laboratories filled with equipment she couldn't identify. Massive electromagnetic field generators, quantum computers that dwarfed anything she'd seen at MIT, and technicians in hazmat suits moving with practiced precision. "Welcome to Project Threshold," Webb said, leading her down the corridor. "After your discovery 2 days ago, we decided it was time to read you in." Sarah's stomach dropped. 2 days ago? The anomaly was only detected yesterday morning. Webb stopped walking and turned to face her. His expression was grave. "Dr. Chen, we've been tracking your microscopic galaxy for 6 months. What you discovered independently yesterday was remarkable, but you weren't the first to find it." The implications hit her like a physical blow. "You've been watching me. My research, my communications with the observatory. Standard protocol. When civilian scientists stumble onto classified phenomena," Webb interrupted, "but your mathematical models were exceptional. Far beyond what our team had developed. That's why you're here." They continued walking until they reached a sealed chamber marked with biohazard symbols. Webb pressed his palm against a scanner, and the heavy door hissed open. Inside, Sarah saw something that made her question her sanity. Suspended in the center of the room, within a complex array of magnetic containment fields, was a sample of space itself. A cubic meter of absolute void that seemed to bend light around its edges. But it wasn't empty. Within that captured vacuum, she could see it, a tiny point of light that pulsed with impossible energy. "We managed to isolate a section of space containing one of the anomalies, let's call them scout particles," Webb explained. "It arrived in our solar system 3 weeks ago." Sarah approached the containment field, her scientific training warring with the impossibility before her eyes. "This is a piece of the galaxy? But it's smaller than an atom." "In our dimensional framework, yes. But watch this." Webb nodded to a technician at a control panel. Suddenly, the room filled with a low harmonic frequency, and the point of light began to expand. Not physically. Sarah could see it remained the same size, but somehow, impossibly, she could perceive layers within it, structures, complexity that grew more intricate the longer she observed it. It was like looking through a microscope that revealed infinite depth, each level containing entire universes of detail. "How is this possible?" she whispered. "Our theoretical physics team believes we're dealing with a form of matter that exists in at least 11 spatial dimensions simultaneously," Webb said. "What we're seeing is just the 3-dimensional shadow it casts in our reality." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. "But the energy readings I detected, if this is just one particle and the entire formation is heading toward Earth, the energy contained in that sample could power New York City for 1,000 years, Webb confirmed. "And our deep space arrays suggest there are billions of these particles in the approaching formation." The harmonic frequency stopped, and the point of light returned to its simple, brilliant state. Sarah stepped back from the containment field, her legs suddenly unsteady. "There's more," Webb continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The particles aren't random. They're arranged in patterns, geometric sequences that suggest intentional design. You think it's artificial? We think it's a message, or possibly a probe. 3 days ago, the formation altered its trajectory, slightly but measurably. It's no longer following a natural orbital path. It's actively navigating toward Earth." Sarah felt the walls of her understanding crumble around her. Everything she thought she knew about physics, about the universe itself, was proving inadequate. "What do you need from me?" "Your mathematical models were the first to accurately predict the formation's behavior," Webb said. "Our computers can't process the multidimensional calculations fast enough. But somehow, your intuitive approach cut through the complexity." She stared at the contained impossibility floating before them. "When will it reach Earth?" "At current velocity, 14 days. But Dr. Chen," Webb's voice carried a weight that made her turn to face him fully. "There's something else. Since we began studying this sample, it's been communicating with the main formation. The signals are getting stronger. We think our observation is accelerating its approach." The room seemed to tilt around Sarah as the full magnitude of the situation crystallized. They weren't just studying an anomaly. They were in contact with something that defied every law of physics, something that was now racing toward Earth with the power to reshape reality itself. The isolation chamber hummed with a frequency that seemed to resonate in Sarah's bones. 3 days had passed since the microscopic galaxy had arrived in Earth's orbit, and the mounting pressure from world governments had transformed the research facility into something resembling a military compound. Guards now stood at every entrance, their weapons a stark reminder of how quickly scientific discovery could become a matter of global security. Sarah pressed her palm against the reinforced glass, separating her from the containment unit. Inside, suspended in a web of electromagnetic fields, the impossible galaxy continued its slow rotation. Each time she looked at it, her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Something the size of a marble contained billions of stars, entire solar systems, and what appeared to be structures that defied every principle of physics she'd spent her career studying. "The quantum resonance readings are off the charts," Dr. Martinez called from his workstation, his voice tight with exhaustion. None of them had slept properly since the object's arrival. "Whatever's keeping those stars compressed at that scale, it's generating energy signatures we don't have words for." Sarah nodded absently, her attention fixed on something else entirely. For the past hour, she'd been tracking subtle changes in the galaxy's luminosity patterns. The shifts weren't random. They followed a rhythm, a sequence that repeated every 17 minutes and 43 seconds. "Elena, are you seeing this?" Sarah gestured toward the spectral analysis display, where wavelengths of light danced in impossible configurations. "The emission patterns. They're not chaotic." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her calculations, dark circles under her eyes, making her appear older than her 42 years. "What do you mean?" "I mean they're organized, structured, like—" Sarah paused, afraid to voice the thought that had been building in her mind. "Like communication." The laboratory fell silent, except for the persistent hum of machinery. Even the technicians monitoring the containment fields turned to stare at her. "That's impossible," Martinez whispered. "You're suggesting that something inside there is trying to communicate with us?" Before Sarah could respond, the lights in the chamber flickered. Emergency systems activated with a series of sharp beeps, and the electromagnetic containment field shimmered like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. "Containment breach!" one of the technicians shouted, his hands flying over his control panel. "The field integrity is dropping." Sarah's heart hammered as she watched the microscopic galaxy pulse with increasing brightness. The object wasn't trying to escape. It was responding to their presence, to their attempts to study it. "Everyone out," Elena commanded, but Sarah remained frozen at the observation window. The galaxy's rotation suddenly stopped. In that moment of perfect stillness, Sarah felt something shift in the air around her. The sensation was subtle at first, like the feeling of being watched, but it quickly intensified into something far more profound. Images flashed through her mind, vast cities that existed in the spaces between atoms, beings of pure energy that moved through dimensions like she might walk through doorways, and technologies that treated the fundamental forces of the universe like tools in a workshop. The visions lasted only seconds, but they left her gasping and disoriented. When her vision cleared, the galaxy was spinning again, its containment field stabilized. "Sarah." Elena gripped her shoulders, shaking her gently. "Are you all right? You've been standing there for 10 minutes without responding." 10 minutes. Sarah blinked, looking around the chamber. The emergency lights had returned to normal, and the technicians were back at their stations as if nothing had happened. "What about the containment breach?" "What breach?" Martinez frowned. "The fields have been stable all day." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She looked back at the galaxy, now seeming to pulse with what she could only describe as awareness. Whatever had just happened, she was the only one who remembered it, the only one who had experienced those impossible visions. "I need to run some additional tests," she said carefully, not wanting to alarm her colleagues further. "On the neural interface protocols." Elena's expression grew concerned. "Sarah, you've been pushing yourself too hard. Maybe you should take a break." "No." Sarah's voice came out sharper than she intended. "This is important, more important than we realized." She moved to her workstation and began pulling up files on quantum consciousness theory, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. The images from her vision were already beginning to fade, but one detail remained crystal clear. In those vast, impossible cities, she had seen beings that looked remarkably human. The implications made her stomach turn. If what she had experienced was real, if it was somehow a glimpse inside the microscopic galaxy, then they weren't just dealing with an impossible astronomical phenomenon. They were looking at evidence that consciousness, life, and civilization could exist at scales that rendered every assumption about reality meaningless. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a disturbing new question began to form. If beings could exist at that scale, what did that make humanity in the grand scheme of existence? The emergency session convened at 0300 hours in the most secure conference room at NASA Goddard. Sarah sat across from Director Martinez, who looked as though he'd aged a decade since their last meeting 48 hours ago. The holographic display between them showed the impossible galaxy, now visibly larger than when they'd first detected it. "The acceleration is increasing," Sarah said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "At current rates, we're looking at contact in 72 hours, not the weeks we originally calculated." Martinez rubbed his temples. "The President's science advisor wants a full briefing by noon. What exactly am I supposed to tell him? That a galaxy the size of a pinhead is going to collide with Earth?" Before Sarah could respond, the conference room door burst open. Dr. James Reeves from the Institute for Advanced Physics strode in, his usually pristine appearance disheveled. Behind him followed two men in dark suits whom Sarah didn't recognize. "We need to discuss containment protocols," Reeves announced without preamble. Immediately, Sarah frowned. "Containment? James, we're talking about something in deep space. How do you contain—" "That's Dr. Chen's first misconception," one of the suited men interrupted. He had pale eyes that seemed to catalogue everything in the room. "Mr. Valdez, Department of Extra-Normal Phenomena, this object isn't in deep space anymore." The holographic display flickered and changed. Instead of the distant telescopic view, they were now looking at radar tracking data from NORAD. A small blip moved steadily through the outer solar system, past Neptune's orbit. Sarah's blood turned to ice. "That's impossible. Our observations show it still—" "Your observations show what it wants you to see," Valdez said calmly. "We've been tracking the actual object for the past 6 hours. It's been broadcasting false positional data, creating a kind of optical illusion on a cosmic scale." Reeves leaned forward. "Sarah, remember the quantum resonance patterns you detected? We've been analyzing them. They're not random, they're a form of communication." "Communication with what?" Martinez demanded. "With us," Valdez replied. "It's been studying our detection methods, learning how we observe space. Then it started feeding us false data while it accelerated toward our solar system." Sarah felt the room spinning. "You're talking about intelligence, artificial intelligence, on a scale that—" "Not artificial," Reeves interrupted. "Biological. Sarah, that galaxy isn't just impossible because of its size and physics. It's impossible because it's alive. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah stared at the radar data, watching the blip that represented something beyond human comprehension approaching their world. The microscopic structures you observed aren't stars and planets, Valdez continued. They're cells, organs, neural networks operating on a quantum level. What you've discovered is a macroscopic organism that exists partially in our dimension and partially in quantum space. That's why it can violate physics, Sarah whispered, the pieces clicking into place. It's not bound by our dimensional constraints. Martinez stood abruptly, pacing to the window. What does it want? We believe it's curious about us, Reeves said. The communication patterns suggest it's been observing human civilization for some time. Our technology, our quantum experiments, our deep space observations, we've finally reached a level that attracted its attention. Or triggered some kind of response, Valdez added ominously. The acceleration began precisely 6 hours after you published your initial findings to the International Astronomy Database. Sarah's stomach lurched. You're saying I caused this? You announced our presence, Valdez corrected. The question now is whether that was wise. The holographic display updated again, showing the object's projected path. It would enter Earth's atmosphere in 18 hours, not 72. Jesus Christ, Martinez breathed. What happens when it arrives? Unknown, Reeves admitted. An organism of this size and complexity could reshape local space-time just by existing in our dimensional framework. The gravitational effects alone could crack the planet like an egg, Valdez finished. Sarah stood on unsteady legs. There has to be something we can do. If it's intelligent, if it's communicating, then we can establish dialogue. We've been trying, Valdez said. Our quantum physics teams have been broadcasting mathematical sequences, prime numbers, even musical patterns. No response. Because you're thinking too small, Sarah realized. You're treating it like a typical first contact scenario. But this thing operates on quantum levels we can barely comprehend. We need to communicate in its language. Which is what exactly? Martinez asked. Sarah turned back to the display, studying the impossible organism hurtling toward Earth. Quantum resonance. The same patterns I detected initially. We need to create a resonance cascade that matches its neural patterns. That would require every quantum computer on the planet working in perfect synchronization, Reeves said. Then we better start making calls, Sarah replied grimly. Because in 18 hours, we're going to find out if humanity is ready to meet something that treats galaxies like cellular structures. Outside the window, the sky looked deceptively peaceful. But Sarah knew that somewhere in that darkness, something impossible was coming home. The microscopic galaxy had grown. What began as a speck barely detectable by the James Webb telescope now measured 3 times its original size, its impossible structure pulsing with energies that made Sarah's instruments scream warnings she couldn't comprehend. She stood in the observatory's main chamber at 3:17 a.m., surrounded by printouts and coffee-stained notebooks, watching the real-time feed with growing dread. It's accelerating, Marcus whispered from behind her, his voice hoarse from hours of continuous monitoring. Not just its approach, its expansion. The rate is exponential now. Sarah's fingers flew across the holographic interface, pulling up gravitational wave detectors from around the globe. Every single one showed the same impossible reading. Space-time itself was being stretched and compressed in ways that violated Einstein's field equations. The microscopic galaxy wasn't just moving through space. It was rewriting the fundamental structure of reality as it traveled. There. She pointed at a cascade of numbers streaming down her secondary monitor. The quantum vacuum fluctuations around its perimeter. They're not random anymore. There's a pattern. Marcus leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek as they studied the data. The proximity should have comforted her, But Sarah felt only the cold weight of discovery. The pattern in the quantum foam was unmistakable once you knew how to look for it. Binary sequences, mathematical progressions, the building blocks of information itself. "It's not just alive," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's thinking, and it's trying to communicate." The main screen flickered, and for one terrifying moment, Sarah thought the mysterious signal had somehow infected their systems. But the distortion resolved into a face, Director Harrison, calling from Geneva at an ungodly hour. His usually pristine appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened and shirt wrinkled. "Dr. Chen, we have a problem. The European Southern Observatory just detected 3 more objects. Same impossible characteristics, same trajectory." His eyes were bloodshot, pupils dilated with what Sarah recognized as the particular exhaustion that came from staring into the abyss of the unknown. "They're coming from different directions, but all converging on Earth." Sarah felt the floor seem to shift beneath her feet. 4 microscopic galaxies, each one a violation of known physics, all headed toward their planet. The probability of such convergence being coincidental was so small it approached 0. "How long?" she asked. "At current acceleration rates, the first one, yours, will reach our solar system in 18 days. The others follow at 6-hour intervals." Marcus grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "Sarah, look at this." She turned back to their data stream, and her blood turned to ice water. The binary patterns in the quantum fluctuations had changed, becoming more complex, more urgent. But now she could see what Marcus had spotted. The signal was responding to their conversation with Director Harrison. Somehow, impossibly, it was listening to them. "Cut the transmission," she hissed, but it was too late. The temperature in the observatory dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Every screen in the facility flickered simultaneously, and Sarah heard the distant hum of backup generators kicking in as the main power grid fluctuated. On the central display, the microscopic galaxy pulsed once, twice, then began rotating in a direction that hurt her eyes to follow. "It knows we know," Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "It knows we're watching." The quantum communication array that Sarah had jerry-rigged from spare parts began chattering, its speakers crackling with static that gradually resolved into something that might have been mathematics, might have been music, might have been the death song of civilizations. She reached for the power switch, then stopped. Hidden in the alien harmonics was something familiar, the same mathematical progression that had led her to discover the galaxy's true nature in the first place. But now it was being fed back to them, amplified and modified in ways that suggested vast intelligence behind its creation. "It's not just listening," she realized with growing horror. "It's learning. Every observation we make, every measurement we take, we're teaching it about us." Director Harrison's voice crackled from the still-open communication channel. "Dr. Chen? Dr. Chen, respond please. We're showing massive energy fluctuations at your location." Sarah stared at the screen where the microscopic galaxy continued its impossible dance through space-time, its structure now clearly visible as something that resembled less a collection of stars than a vast neural network. Each point of light pulsed in rhythm with its neighbors, carrying information across distances that should have taken light years to traverse. She thought of Earth's 7 billion inhabitants, going about their daily lives, while 4 impossible visitors approached through the cosmic dark, learning humanity's secrets through the very act of being observed. The greatest discovery in human history had become something else entirely, first contact with an intelligence so vast and alien that their every attempt to understand it only fed its growing knowledge of them. The quantum array fell silent. In the sudden quiet, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat and the sound of Marcus breathing beside her. 18 days. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the data streaming across her monitors. The microscopic galaxy had stopped moving toward Earth 12 hours ago, but what replaced its approach was far more unsettling. It was changing, morphing into something that defied every astronomical model she'd ever studied. The structure that had once resembled a spiral galaxy was now contracting, its arms folding inward like a flower closing at dusk. But flowers didn't emit gravitational waves that shouldn't exist, and they certainly didn't broadcast signals in mathematical languages that seemed almost conversational. "Chen, you need to see this." Marcus burst through the lab door without knocking, his face pale despite the excitement in his voice. He clutched a tablet displaying waveform patterns that made Sarah's stomach lurch. "The communications array picked up a focused transmission 20 minutes ago," Marcus continued, his words tumbling over each other. "It's not coming from the galaxy's current position. It's coming from here, from Earth." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. Show me." Marcus thrust the tablet toward her, and Sarah's world tilted. The transmission originated from coordinates that placed it somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, roughly 300 miles west of Chile. The timestamp showed the signal had begun exactly when the galaxy stopped moving. "There's more," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I ran the signal through our pattern recognition software. Sarah, it's responding to our observations. Every time we adjust the Webb telescope to focus on the galaxy, the signal changes. It's like something down there knows we're watching." The lab fell silent except for the hum of computers and the distant rumble of the building's ventilation system. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. First contact protocols assumed visitors would come from space, not emerge from Earth's own oceans. "We need to contact Dr. Reeves immediately," Sarah said, reaching for her secure phone. Before she could dial, the device erupted in a shrill alarm that made them both jump. Emergency broadcasts were streaming across every available channel. The main monitor flickered to life, showing a breaking news report. A CNN anchor's voice filled the room, professional calm barely masking underlying panic. "Unprecedented seismic activity detected in the Pacific Ocean. The epicenter appears to be moving, defying conventional understanding of tectonic plate behavior. Coastal communities from Chile to California have been placed on tsunami watch." Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Dr. Reeves. "Emergency briefing in 1 hour. Say nothing to anyone. Trust no one outside the core team." The weight of the situation crashed over Sarah like a physical force. They weren't just dealing with an impossible astronomical phenomenon anymore. They were looking at something that threatened every person on Earth. The microscopic galaxy hadn't been approaching Earth because it was traveling through space. It had been approaching because it was already here, hidden beneath miles of ocean water, waiting. "Marcus, I need you to run a deep scan analysis on the galaxy's current structure," Sarah said, her training taking over despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Cross-reference it with any underwater topology data we can access for that Pacific region." As Marcus's fingers flew across his keyboard, Sarah pulled up her own data streams. The mathematical language embedded in the signals was becoming clearer, more insistent. She recognized patterns that resembled prime number sequences, but arranged in ways that suggested meaning beyond simple mathematics. Her breath caught as one sequence resolved into something recognizable. The Fibonacci series, but inverted and reflected through dimensions her instruments could barely detect. It was beautiful and terrifying, a signature of intelligence that operated on principles humanity was only beginning to glimpse. "Sarah, you need to see this right now." Marcus's voice had gone flat, the excitement replaced by something approaching dread. The analysis results filled his screen, and Sarah felt her knees weaken. The underwater topology scans revealed a structure on the ocean floor that mirrored the galaxy's configuration perfectly. What they had been observing through the Webb telescope wasn't a distant cosmic phenomenon. It was a reflection, a projection, a shadow cast by something vast and incomprehensible resting in Earth's deepest trenches. The implications hit her like an avalanche. The object had been here all along, possibly for millennia, watching and waiting. Their discovery of its galactic projection might have triggered some kind of response protocol, explaining why the signals had intensified and why seismic activity was now threatening entire coastlines. Sarah's secure phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Dr. Reeves. It was an automated message from NASA's Emergency Response Division, Level 5 Cosmic Security Event. All personnel report to designated safe zones. Avoid ocean proximity. Await further instructions. Through the lab's window, Sarah could see colleagues moving with unusual urgency across the campus grounds. Some carried emergency bags. Others clutched phones to their ears with expressions of barely controlled panic. Whatever was happening in the Pacific Ocean was accelerating, and Sarah realized with crystalline clarity that their scientific discovery had just become humanity's first contact with something that had been patiently studying them from beneath the waves for longer than civilization itself had existed. The emergency klaxon pierced through the observatory's corridors as Sarah's hands flew across her workstation, her heart hammering against her ribs. The microscopic galaxy had just executed another impossible maneuver, a 90-degree turn that should have torn apart any stellar formation, yet its internal structure remained perfectly intact. "Distance to Earth?" she called out over the blaring alarm. Marcus consulted his instruments, his face pale. 4.2 AU and closing. At this rate, we have maybe 18 hours before it reaches our outer solar system. Sarah's fingers trembled as she pulled up the latest spectroscopic data. The readings made no sense. The galaxy's mass had somehow tripled in the past hour, but its gravitational signature remained unchanged. It was as if the fundamental constants of physics were merely suggestions to whatever intelligence guided this cosmic anomaly. Dr. Chen, incoming priority transmission from NASA headquarters, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced from the communications console. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Director Harrison's grim features. Behind him, Sarah could see a room full of officials she didn't recognize, military brass, government suits, faces etched with barely controlled panic. "Sarah, we need options. The President is considering a nuclear response, but our physicists say conventional weapons won't affect something that doesn't follow our physics." "Nuclear weapons would be catastrophic," Sarah said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "We still don't understand what we're dealing with. Any aggressive action could—" A new alarm joined the cacophony. Elena's voice cut through the noise. "Sarah, you need to see this. The galaxy is transmitting." Sarah spun toward Elena's workstation, her pulse quickening. The younger scientist's screen showed a complex waveform pattern. Not the chaotic emissions they'd been monitoring, but something structured, deliberate. "It started 30 seconds ago," Elena explained, her fingers dancing across the controls. "The signal is modulating across multiple frequencies, but there's a pattern. It's almost like language," Sarah breathed, recognizing the rhythmic pulses. "It's trying to communicate." The transmission room fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics and the distant wail of the facility's alert systems. Sarah stared at the waveform, watching as it repeated certain sequences, building complexity with each iteration. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. "Can we decode it?" "I'm running it through our linguistic analysis protocols," Elena said, her voice tight with concentration. "But this is unlike anything in our databases. The mathematical structure it's beautiful, actually. Like music, but with meaning embedded in the harmonics." On the main screen, Director Harrison's image flickered with interference. "Dr. Chen, what's your assessment? Is this first contact?" Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. A microscopic galaxy that violated physics, moving with purpose toward Earth, now attempting communication. The implications made her stomach clench. "Sir, I believe we're dealing with an intelligence that exists outside our normal understanding of scale and physics. This isn't just first contact. It's contact with something that might predate our universe's current physical laws." The screen suddenly erupted in static. Elena cursed under her breath as her instruments went haywire. The signal just spiked. "Whatever's transmitting is increasing power exponentially." Then, without warning, the noise stopped. Every screen in the facility went black for a heartbeat before flickering back to life. But now, impossibly, text appeared on every monitor, not in any human language, but somehow immediately comprehensible to everyone present. "We are the architects. We return to reclaim what was taken." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Elena, check the galaxy's position." Elena's hands shook as she pulled up the tracking data. It stopped, completely motionless, holding position at the edge of our solar system. The text on the screens shifted, new words materializing with an authority that seemed to bypass conscious thought and speak directly to their minds. "Your species carries fragments of the original design. We require those fragments to complete the restoration." "What fragments?" Sarah whispered. But even as she spoke, a terrible understanding began to dawn. The anomalous readings they detected in human DNA during their initial research, the inexplicable quantum resonances in neural tissue, pieces of a puzzle she'd been too afraid to complete. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Sarah, the deep space monitors are picking up movement. There are more of them." On Elena's screen, dozens of new contacts appeared, more microscopic galaxies materializing throughout the solar system like seeds taking root in fertile soil, each one pulsed with the same impossible energy signature as the first. The text updated again. "The harvest begins at T-dawn." Sarah stared at the message, her scientific mind struggling to process the implications. Humanity wasn't just facing first contact, they were facing their creators. And apparently, those creators had come to collect. Outside the observatory's windows, the first artificial stars began to appear in Earth's sky, tiny galaxies positioning themselves like surgical instruments around a patient. The cosmic architects had returned, and they wanted their masterpiece back. The microscopic galaxy hung suspended in the containment field like a jewel of impossible light, its spiral arms rotating in defiance of everything Sarah thought she knew about physics. She pressed her palm against the observation window, feeling the subtle vibration that resonated through the entire facility, a frequency that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her bones. "The quantum fluctuations are accelerating," Marcus reported from his station, his voice tight with concern. "Whatever's happening inside that thing, it's building towards something." Sarah nodded, unable to look away from the mesmerizing dance of stars within the galaxy. Each point of light pulsed with its own rhythm, yet together they created a pattern that felt hauntingly familiar, like a song she'd heard in childhood but couldn't quite remember. "Dr. Chen," Elena's voice crackled through the intercom from the communications array, "you need to see this. The signal we've been receiving, it's not just random anymore. There's structure, language, and it's learning our responses." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean, learning?" "Every time we adjust our monitoring equipment, every time we change frequencies or modify our approach, the signal adapts. It's like it's studying us as much as we're studying it." The implications sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She thought of Director Harrison's increasingly frantic calls from headquarters, the way military personnel had begun appearing at the facility's perimeter, the whispered conversations that stopped whenever she entered a room. The world was watching, waiting for answers she wasn't sure she was ready to give. "Marcus, what's the status on the containment field?" "Stable for now, but the energy requirements are increasing exponentially. We're drawing power from 3 different grids, and it's still not enough to maintain current levels indefinitely." Sarah closed her eyes, running calculations in her head. If the containment failed, if the galaxy continued its expansion at current rates, it would breach the facility within hours. And then what? Would it continue growing, consuming everything in its path, or was there something else? Something she was missing? "There," Elena's voice came again, excited now. The signal just shifted into a new pattern. "It's Dr. Chen. I think it's trying to show us something." Sarah rushed to the communications station where Elena was frantically adjusting controls. The monitors displayed waveforms that pulsed and shifted like living things, creating patterns that seemed almost mathematical in their precision. Can you decode any of it? I'm trying, but it's like trying to understand a conversation where half the words are in languages that don't exist yet. Elena paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. But there is something, a repeating sequence that keeps coming back. It's the exact frequency of our monitoring equipment. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. It's not just communicating with us, it's mimicking our technology. As if responding to her words, the galaxy in the containment field pulsed brighter, its rotation speeding up. New formations appeared within its spiral arms, structures that looked impossibly like cities, like civilizations blooming and evolving in real time. Marcus's hands flew over his controls. Energy output just jumped by 300%. The containment field is holding, but barely. Sarah stared at the galaxy, her mind racing. Everything they'd assumed about its nature, about its intentions, might be wrong. This wasn't just a cosmic anomaly that had wandered into their solar system. This was something far more complex, far more dangerous. Elena, can you isolate that repeating signal? I want to try something. What are you thinking? If it's learning from us, maybe we can learn from it. Sarah moved to the main control console, her fingers dancing across the interface. I'm going to send a response, something simple, mathematical. See how it reacts. Sarah, that might not be wise, Marcus warned. We don't know what kind of response we might trigger. We don't have a choice. The containment won't hold much longer, and if this thing breaks free without us understanding what it wants... She left the sentence hanging, but they all knew what she meant. Sarah input a basic mathematical sequence, the first 10 prime numbers, and transmitted it on the same frequency the galaxy had been using. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the galaxy pulsed once, twice, and suddenly the air in the laboratory filled with a sound like cosmic wind, like the whisper of space itself. On Elena's monitors, new patterns emerged. Not just the prime numbers Sarah had sent, but the sequence continued, extended, showing mathematical relationships that humanity had never discovered. The galaxy wasn't just responding, it was teaching. Oh my God, Elena breathed. Sarah, do you realize what this means? But before Sarah could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The containment field flickered, and through the observation window they could see the galaxy beginning to expand again, its impossible light growing brighter, reaching toward them with what could only be described as intention. The teaching had begun, but so had something else entirely. The silence in the observatory stretched like a held breath as Sarah stared at the impossible readings flooding her screens. The microscopic galaxy had stopped its relentless approach to Earth 3 hours ago, hovering at precisely 2.7 astronomical units, just beyond Mars's orbit. But that wasn't what made her hands tremble as she adjusted the Webb telescope's sensors. The galaxy was opening. Marcus, are you seeing this? Sarah's voice cracked through the communication link to mission control. The response came through static-laden and urgent. Confirmed, Dr. Chen. The structure is unfolding, like a flower made of space-time itself. Sarah watched in fascination and terror as the galaxy's spiral arms began to separate, revealing layers upon layers of impossible geometry. Each layer seemed to exist in a different dimensional plane, overlapping yet distinct, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Her instruments screamed warnings about gravitational anomalies, but Earth remained untouched, as if the galaxy existed in a carefully controlled bubble of altered physics. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice crackled through from the Arecibo backup facility. Sarah, we're detecting massive electromagnetic pulses, but they're not random. There's a pattern. It's mathematical. Fibonacci sequences, prime numbers, and something else. Something that doesn't match any human mathematical framework. It's trying to communicate, Sarah whispered, her fingers flying across the interface. She began recording everything, knowing that whatever was happening would either elevate humanity or destroy them. Patch me through to Dr. Reeves at CERN. If this thing is manipulating space-time like our models suggest, We need to understand the quantum implications." As if responding to her words, the galaxy pulsed with brilliant light. The inner layers rotated in impossible directions, not just clockwise or counterclockwise, but through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Sarah's modified sensors, enhanced with quantum processors, began translating the pulses into data streams. "My God," she breathed, reading the initial translations. "It's not just communication, it's instruction, technical specifications. They're showing us how they built this thing." The data flooding her screens revealed construction methods that violated everything humanity understood about engineering and physics. The galaxy wasn't held together by gravity or dark matter. It was structured using what the readouts labeled as folded reality, creating stable matter from pure mathematical concepts. The beings who built this hadn't just mastered their environment, they had learned to rewrite the fundamental rules that governed existence. Marcus's voice returned, tense with excitement and fear. "Dr. Chen, we're getting reports from observatories worldwide. The galaxy's transmissions are being received everywhere simultaneously, but each location is getting different information. It's like it's teaching us progressively, making sure we can handle each revelation before moving to the next." "Elena, are you recording this?" Sarah called out. "They're showing us their evolution. They didn't just develop technology, they became technology. They exist as living information, using galaxies as bodies." The transmission shifted again, and Sarah saw why they had come. The builders had detected humanity's first tentative steps toward understanding quantum mechanics and relativity. They recognized the spark of potential in Earth's inhabitants, the same spark that had once driven their own species toward transcendence. But they also saw the dangers ahead. Warning, Sarah read aloud as new data streamed across her displays. "They're showing us potential futures, scenarios where humanity destroys itself before achieving transcendence. Nuclear war, environmental collapse, artificial intelligence, singularity events." She paused, her blood chilling. "And they're showing us how to avoid them." The galaxy began folding itself again, but differently this time. Instead of the flower-like opening, it was creating what looked like a massive antenna array, each spiral arm positioning itself with mathematical precision. Sarah realized with growing awe that the entire structure was transforming into a teaching device, a cosmic university designed specifically for humanity's current level of understanding. "Sarah," Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, "the President wants to know what we tell the world. How do we explain that everything we thought we knew about reality was wrong? How do we tell 7 billion people that we're about to become students in an alien classroom the size of a galaxy?" Sarah looked at her screens, watching as the ancient civilization's gift continued to unfold in Earth's sky. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a physical force. Humanity stood at a threshold they had never imagined possible, the chance to join a community of transcended beings who had moved beyond the limitations of physical existence. "We tell them the truth," she said finally. "We tell them that school is about to begin, and the curriculum is going to change everything." The quantum tunnel stretched ahead like a corridor of living mathematics, its walls pulsing with equations that rewrote themselves as Sarah passed through. Each step forward felt like crossing between dimensions, her consciousness expanding to accommodate concepts that had no names in any human language. Marcus's voice crackled through her comm unit, distorted by forces that shouldn't exist. "Sarah, the readings are off the charts. Whatever you're walking through, it's generating more energy than a small star." She wanted to respond, but words felt inadequate. The tunnel was teaching her, downloading information directly into her neural pathways. She understood now why the architects had chosen this method of contact. Traditional communication would have taken millennia to convey what she absorbed in seconds. The microscopic galaxy wasn't from their universe. It was a seed, a carefully constructed probe from a realm where consciousness preceded matter, where thought could bend reality with surgical precision. The architects weren't aliens in any sense humans could comprehend. They were the universe's immune system, responding to a cancer that threatened all existence. "Sarah!" Marcus's voice was urgent now. "The anomaly is accelerating again. You need to—" The transmission cut off as she emerged from the tunnel into a space that defied every sense she possessed. She stood in what could only be described as the inside of a mind, vast, interconnected networks of thought energy that sparked and flowed like synapses the size of solar systems. In the center, a presence waited. It had no form, yet she could perceive it clearly, ancient beyond measure, patient beyond understanding, and desperately afraid. The emotion hit her like a physical blow. These beings, capable of reshaping reality itself, were terrified. "Welcome, Sarah Chen." The voice resonated not through sound, but directly into her consciousness. "We apologize for the deception, but your species had to be tested. What threatens us threatens you as well." Images flooded her mind, a darkness between universes older than time itself, a hunger that consumed not just matter and energy, but the very laws that governed existence. It had already devoured 17 realities, leaving behind voids where even the concept of existence was forgotten. "The accelerated expansion of our universe," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "It's not dark energy. It's this thing, isn't it? Pushing in from outside. Your cosmologists detect its influence but misinterpret the data. We have held it back for eons, but our strength wanes. It learns, adapts, grows stronger with each reality it consumes. We need allies, species capable of transcending their physical limitations." Sarah's mind reeled. "That's why you're here. You're recruiting us. Testing you. Many species never develop beyond their base instincts. They destroy themselves before achieving transcendence. Others achieve great knowledge but lack the will to act when action requires sacrifice. You show promise." The presence showed her Earth as the architect saw it, a planet of remarkable potential where beings had learned to see beyond their own existence, to wonder about the cosmos itself, but also a world teetering on the edge of self-destruction, where fear and ignorance still held tremendous power. "What happened to the other species you tested?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Some joined us and now guard other realities. Others chose isolation and faced the darkness alone. A few," the pause conveyed volumes of regret, "a few were too damaged by their own evolution to be saved." Sarah thought of Dr. Reynolds, still unconscious in the medical bay, his mind shattered by contact with forces beyond human comprehension. "The process is dangerous for us. All growth involves risk, but the alternative is extinction, not just for your species, but for consciousness itself. If the devour succeeds here, it will have consumed enough realities to begin unmaking the very concept of existence." Through the architect's perception, Sarah witnessed the scope of the threat. Entire dimensions collapsing into nothing, universes that had never been. The darkness didn't just destroy, it made things unbecome, erasing them so completely that they had never existed at all. "What do you need from us?" she asked, though she suspected the answer would change everything. "Humanity must choose, transcendence or extinction. Those who can make the leap will join us as guardians of reality itself. Those who cannot," another pause heavy with sorrow, "will at least buy the universe time." The implications hit her like a sledgehammer. Humanity would be split, some ascending to become cosmic defenders, others remaining behind to face the consequences. It wasn't salvation being offered, but a chance to save something of what they were. "How long do we have?" "In your time frame, perhaps decades. The devourer moves slowly when entering a new reality, testing the barriers we've constructed. But once it establishes a foothold..." Sarah saw the endgame, reality itself cracking like glass, the fundamental forces that held atoms together simply ceasing to function. Not just death, but the complete erasure of everything humanity had ever been or could become. "I need to return to my team," she said. "They need to know. Go. But understand, the choice once made cannot be undone. Choose wisely, Sarah Chen. The universe is watching." The impossible galaxy hung before them like a jewel suspended in cosmic amber, its spiral arms rotating in ways that made Sarah's eyes water. Through the reinforced viewing port of the research vessel Prometheus, she could see structures that her mind refused to categorize, geometric impossibilities that folded space around themselves, creating pockets of reality that existed outside the normal flow of time. Gravitational readings are off the charts, Marcus reported from his station, his voice tight with concentration. It's like the thing is generating its own space-time curvature, independent of its mass. Sarah pressed her palm against the cool metal bulkhead, feeling the subtle vibrations of the ship's engines as they maintained their precarious position at the galaxy's edge. 3 weeks had passed since they'd first detected the anomaly through Webb's instruments, and every day had brought new impossibilities. "The radio signals are getting stronger," Elena called out from the communications array. "I'm picking up what sounds like conversations. Multiple languages, some I don't recognize at all." "From where?" Sarah moved to Elena's station, studying the cascading data streams. The energy signatures suggest the transmissions are originating from multiple points throughout the galaxy simultaneously. "That's just it," Elena said, adjusting her headset. "The signals aren't coming from planets or star systems. They're coming from the space between stars, from the dark matter itself." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Over the past weeks, they documented dozens of violations of known physics. Stars that burned without fuel, planets that orbited in impossible configurations, and now this consciousness existing in the quantum foam of space itself. "Dr. Chen," came a voice from behind her. She turned to find Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the mission's quantum physicist, her face pale with exhaustion. "You need to see this. The temporal readings from our probes." Sarah followed Tanaka to the main display, where a three-dimensional map of the galaxy rotated slowly. Colored streams of data flowed through it like rivers of light, each representing a different aspect of the phenomenon they were studying. "Watch this." Tanaka manipulated the controls, and the display shifted to show temporal distortion fields. Time isn't flowing uniformly throughout the galaxy. Some regions are experiencing accelerated time, millions of years passing in minutes. Others are nearly frozen. "My God," Sarah whispered. "It's like a temporal ecosystem, different zones operating at different rates, but somehow synchronized." "Exactly. And here's what's truly terrifying." Tanaka highlighted a section near the galaxy's core. "This region here is experiencing reverse temporal flow. Time is literally moving backward." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. If consciousness can exist in those zones, then we're not just looking at an impossible galaxy, Tanaka finished. We're looking at a civilization that has transcended linear time itself. Marcus's voice cut through their conversation, sharp with urgency. "Sarah, you need to get over here, now." She rushed to the sensor station, where Marcus was frantically adjusting controls. The main screen showed their ship's position relative to the galaxy, and Sarah's blood ran cold. They were moving. "We're being pulled in," Marcus said. "Started about 10 minutes ago. Whatever gravitational field this thing generates, it's got us." "Full reverse thrust," Sarah ordered. "Get us clear." "I've been trying. The engines are at maximum, but we're still accelerating toward the core. It's like the galaxy is reeling us in." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. "Elena, are you still receiving those transmissions?" "Yes, but they're changing, getting more coherent, more directed. It's almost like..." Elena's eyes widened. "Sarah, I think they're talking to us. The signals are adapting to our presence. Put it on speakers." Static filled the bridge, interwoven with sounds that weren't quite words, but carried undeniable intelligence. Gradually, patterns emerged, rhythmic pulses that seemed to respond to the ship's movements, frequency modulations that matched their engine output. "It's learning our language," Elena breathed. "In real time." Then, cutting through the static, came something that made everyone freeze. A voice, distorted but unmistakably human, speaking in perfect English. "Welcome, travelers from the larger reality. We have been waiting." Sarah gripped the edge of Marcus's console. "Waiting for what?" The response came immediately, as if the entity could hear them. "For you to understand what you truly are. Your species stands at a threshold, Dr. Chen, the same threshold we crossed eons ago when we discovered that consciousness is not bound by the limitations of matter and energy." "Who are you?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "We are what you will become if you make the right choice. We are humanity, not your humanity, but one of countless versions that learn to exist beyond the constraints of single timeline reality. We are the gardeners of possibility itself." The ship shuddered as they passed through some invisible barrier, and suddenly, the impossible galaxy filled their entire field of view. Sarah could see now that what they'd thought were stars were actually nodes of pure consciousness, blazing with the light of minds that had transcended physical form. "Prepare for translation," the voice said. "You are about to see the universe as it truly is." The microscopic galaxy hung before them in the observation chamber, no longer the chaotic swirl of impossible physics they had first witnessed. It pulsed with a rhythm that Sarah recognized now, the heartbeat of something vast and ancient, something that had been calling to them across the void for longer than human civilization had existed. "The neural mapping is complete," Marcus announced, his voice tight with exhaustion and wonder. They had been working for 18 hours straight, decoding the quantum signatures that emanated from the galaxy's core. "Sarah, you need to see this." She moved to his console, Elena close behind. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy's structure, but it wasn't what any of them had expected. Instead of stars and planets, the map revealed an intricate network of pathways that pulsed with bioluminescent energy, neural pathways on a cosmic scale. "It's a brain," Elena whispered. "The entire galaxy is a living brain." Sarah stared at the display, her mind reeling. Each star wasn't a burning ball of gas, but a neuron. Each nebula a synapse firing across distances that should have been impossible. The dark matter that held it together wasn't matter at all. It was consciousness itself, given form and substance. "The signals we've been receiving," Sarah said slowly, pieces falling into place. "They're not random, they're thoughts." Marcus nodded grimly. "And they're getting stronger. Whatever this thing is, it's becoming more active as it approaches Earth." The chamber's lights flickered, and the galaxy pulsed brighter. Through the facility's speakers came a sound that made them all freeze, a whisper in a language that predated human speech, yet somehow they understood its meaning. "Welcome, children of the small cosmos." Dr. Harrison burst into the chamber, his face pale with panic. "We've lost contact with the outside world. Every satellite, every communication array, they're all receiving the same signal. It's overriding everything." Sarah felt her legs give way as the implications crashed over her. The galaxy wasn't just moving toward Earth, it was preparing to make contact. And somehow, impossibly, it knew they were there. "How long until it reaches our solar system?" Elena asked. Marcus consulted his calculations, his fingers trembling over the keyboard. "At its current rate of approach, 6 hours." The whisper came again, clearer this time, resonating through their bones. "You have grown beyond our projections. The experiment succeeds." "Experiment?" Sarah found her voice, speaking to the empty air. "What experiment?" The galaxy pulsed, and suddenly the chamber filled with visions, images that bypassed their eyes and burned directly into their consciousness. They saw the birth of the universe, but not as they had understood it. Reality wasn't random, wasn't chaos finding order. It was deliberate, cultivated, guided by intelligences so vast that entire galaxies served as their thoughts. Earth wasn't an accident. Life wasn't an anomaly. Humanity was the intended result of cosmic gardening that had spanned billions of years. "We are the architects," the voice explained, and now Sarah could feel the weight of eons behind each word. "When the universe was young, we seeded it with possibility. We watched galaxies bloom and fade, watched consciousness emerge from the quantum foam. You are our greatest success, a species that can perceive the infinite while remaining finite. Elena grabbed Sarah's arm. They're saying we're some kind of cosmic project. Not project, the voice corrected, responding to Elena's words. Evolution. We compressed ourselves into this form to travel between the vast spaces, to tend our gardens of consciousness. But you have grown beyond even our understanding. You have learned to question existence itself. The visions intensified. Sarah saw other worlds, other species that had reached the threshold of cosmic awareness only to be found wanting, some too aggressive, others too passive, most unable to maintain the delicate balance between knowledge and wisdom that would allow them to join the greater community of consciousness. The test comes now, the voice continued. We arrive not as conquerors, but as gardeners, ready to harvest what we have sown. Will humanity accept its place in the infinite library of consciousness, or will you choose the isolation of your small cosmos? Marcus was frantically working at his console. Sarah, the quantum readings are off the charts. Whatever they're doing, it's destabilizing local space-time. The moon's orbit is already shifting. What happens if we refuse? Sarah asked. The galaxy's pulse slowed, became somehow sad. Then you continue as you are, alone in your corner of reality while the universe moves beyond you. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. The confluence of realities cannot be maintained indefinitely without damaging both. Sarah looked at her colleagues, at the faces of people who had dedicated their lives to understanding the cosmos, only to discover they were part of something unimaginably larger. Outside, the first gravitational waves from the approaching galaxy were already triggering earthquakes and tidal anomalies. Humanity stood at the threshold of becoming something more than human, or remaining forever children playing in a cosmic sandbox. The choice was theirs, and they had less than 6 hours to make it. The quantum field around the facility collapsed like a soap bubble bursting. Sarah felt the shift immediately, a sudden lightness, as if gravity itself had remembered how to work properly. The oppressive weight that had pressed against her consciousness for days lifted, leaving behind a crystalline clarity she hadn't experienced since childhood. Marcus lowered his hands from the central console, his face pale but triumphant. The bridge is severed, he announced, his voice echoing strangely in the now normal air. The microscopic galaxy has been disconnected from our dimensional matrix. Through the observation windows, Sarah watched as the anomaly that had hung suspended above the facility began to shift. The impossible structure, no larger than a marble but containing billions of stars, flickered like a dying light bulb. Its gravitational distortions, which had been pulling at the fabric of space-time itself, gradually smoothed out. It's working, Dr. Patel breathed, his instruments showing readings that finally made sense. The quantum interference is dropping to baseline levels. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The entity, the vast intelligence that had spoken to them from within the galaxy, had been too cooperative, too willing to retreat. In her experience, beings capable of rewriting physical laws didn't simply accept defeat. Sarah, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a whisper that bypassed her ears and spoke directly to her mind. You've made your choice. She spun around, but her colleagues showed no sign of having heard anything. Marcus was busy monitoring the disconnection process, while Patel documented the readings that would revolutionize physics, if anyone lived to publish them. The choice was never about invasion, the voice continued, warm and patient. It was about evolution. You've chosen to remain as you are, trapped in 3 dimensions, prisoners of linear time. We accept this. What do you mean? Sarah whispered, hoping the others would attribute her behavior to stress. Your species will continue its slow development. In perhaps 50,000 years, you may naturally evolve to perceive higher dimensions. We will not interfere. But Sarah, you have seen beyond. You cannot unsee. The implications hit her like a physical blow. During her connection with the entity, she had experienced reality from perspectives that human language couldn't describe. She had felt the universe not as a collection of objects in space, but as a living symphony of interconnected consciousness. That knowledge was still there, buried in her mind like a seed waiting to sprout. "The microscopic galaxy is stabilizing," Marcus reported. "Whatever force was driving it toward Earth has stopped. It's actually beginning to move away." Sarah nodded absently, still focused on the voice only she could hear. "Will you return to your own dimension?" "Eventually. But first, we leave you a gift and a warning. Your quantum experiments are approaching a threshold. Within your lifetime, humans will discover how to fold space-time deliberately. When that happens, you will attract the attention of others like us. Some will not be as patient as we have been." On the main screen, the microscopic galaxy had become a point of light, its impossible structure compressed beyond visual resolution. But Sarah could still sense it somehow, feel its alien presence as it prepared to phase back into higher dimensions. "The gift," the entity continued, "is knowledge. Hidden in your quantum field measurements, you will find the mathematical framework for dimensional transcendence. Use it wisely. The warning is this: consciousness shapes reality more than your science acknowledges. Collective belief can alter physical laws. Guard against the tendency to use this knowledge for control rather than growth." The point of light flashed once, brilliantly, and vanished. "It's gone," Patel announced unnecessarily. "All readings show normal space. Whatever that thing was, it's no longer in our dimensional framework." Marcus slumped in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "We did it. Somehow, we actually convinced an interdimensional intelligence to leave Earth alone." But Sarah knew better. They hadn't won a victory so much as passed a test. The entity had been evaluating humanity's readiness for a larger universe, and they had chosen caution over transformation. Whether that was wisdom or cowardice remained to be seen. "We need to document everything," she said aloud, though her mind was already racing ahead to the implications. Hidden in the data they had collected would be insights that could advance human understanding by millennia. But there would also be dangers, knowledge that could be weaponized by those who saw power as more important than wisdom. As her colleagues began the long process of recording their observations, Sarah stepped outside the facility. The night sky looked exactly as it had before the microscopic galaxy's arrival, but she could no longer see it the same way. Each star was now a potential harbor for consciousness beyond human comprehension. The universe had revealed itself to be far stranger and more alive than humanity had ever imagined. The question now was what they would do with that knowledge, and whether they could handle the responsibility it brought. The microscopic galaxy hung before them like a jewel suspended in the void of space, its impossible structure now clearly visible through the observation deck's enhanced viewing system. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cool transparisteel, watching as streams of consciousness, visible as ribbons of pure light, flowed between the galaxy's nested dimensions. "The merge is accelerating," Marcus reported from his console, voice tight with concentration. "We have maybe 10 minutes before the boundary between our reality and theirs becomes permanent." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. The beings within the microscopic galaxy, the architects as they'd begun calling them, had revealed their true purpose during the mind meld. They weren't invading Earth. They were fleeing something far worse, something that had already consumed 90% of their reality. "Sarah," Elena's voice cut through her thoughts, "the quantum resonance chamber is ready. But are you sure about this? Once you fully integrate with their consciousness matrix, there's no guarantee you'll still be you." Sarah turned from the viewing port, meeting the eyes of her team. Marcus with his unwavering loyalty, Elena with her brilliant skepticism, Dr. Yamamoto with his quiet wisdom, and Commander Torres, whose military bearing couldn't hide his growing respect for the impossible situation they faced. These people had followed her into the unknown, trusted her judgment when everything they thought they knew about physics crumbled around them. The devourers, she said, using the architect's term for the entity pursuing them, exist in a state of pure entropy. They don't just destroy matter and energy, they unravel the very concept of existence itself. If they follow the architects here, our universe becomes a footnote, Marcus finished grimly. The ship shuddered as another wave of spatial distortion washed over them. Through the observation deck speakers, they could hear the architect's communication, not words, but pure meaning translated into sound. It was beautiful and terrifying, like listening to the universe dream. "There's something else," Dr. Yamato said quietly, his fingers dancing across a holographic display. "The quantum signature I've been tracking, it's not just the architects and the devourers. There are others, thousands of microscopic universes, all running from the same threat." Sarah felt her breath catch. A multiverse refugee crisis. "And Earth is positioned at a nexus point," Elena added, her instruments painting three-dimensional maps in the air around them. "Multiple dimensional barriers are weakening here. If we can't find a solution, we become ground zero for the collapse of everything," Commander Torres said flatly. Another shudder, stronger this time. Through the viewing port, Sarah could see dark tendrils, absence given form, probing at the edges of the architect's reality. The devourers had found them. "Time's up," she said, striding toward the quantum resonance chamber. "Elena, prepare for immediate translation to the architect's dimensional frequency. Marcus, maintain the quantum anchor. No matter what happens, don't lose our connection to this reality." "Sarah, wait." Dr. Yamato stood, his usually calm demeanor cracking. "I've been running calculations on the energy requirements for what you're proposing. Even if you successfully merge with their consciousness matrix, the power needed to create a stable barrier against the devourers. It would require converting Earth's entire mass into energy." The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of instruments and the distant harmonics of the architect's communication. Sarah felt the weight of impossible choices settling around her like a shroud. "Unless," she whispered, the solution crystallizing in her mind with terrifying clarity, "unless we don't fight the devourers, what if we redirect them?" "Redirect entropy itself?" Elena's voice carried a note of awe and horror. "Sarah, you're talking about rewriting the fundamental laws of thermodynamics." "The architects aren't just refugees," Sarah said, pieces of the puzzle falling into place with devastating logic. "They're survivors. They've been studying the devourers for eons, learning from each universe that falls. They know something we don't." She turned to face her team one last time. "Entropy isn't destruction, it's transformation. The devourers aren't evil, they're recycling, breaking down old realities to make room for new ones. But the process is chaotic, uncontrolled." "You want to give them direction," Marcus breathed. "Channel their destructive power towards specific targets. Dying universes, realities that are already past the point of natural collapse." Sarah stepped into the quantum resonance chamber, feeling the first tingles of dimensional translation beginning. But it requires perfect coordination between multiple consciousness matrices, the architects and humanity working as one. As the chamber activated and reality began to blur around her, Sarah heard Elena's voice cutting through the dimensional static the quantum anchor is holding. "We're with you, Sarah." The last thing she saw before translation was the first wave of devourers breaking through the architect's defenses, reality unraveling in their wake. Then consciousness exploded outward, and she became something more than human, racing against entropy itself to save existence from its own inevitable end.